Hello, ladies. Our story today is John 8, 2-11, the adulteress woman. The long night in her cell had given her time to think, time to regret, and time to fear the terror that awaited her in the morning light. Oh, what a fool she had been. A fool to believe he loved her. A fool to tell herself over and again the lie that she needed to believe the most. Just one more time. As hard as she tried, she just could not get out of her mind the image of him walking away into the night, a bag of temple silver jingling in his hand as they led her alone to condemnation. He never even looked back. How exactly does one commit adultery alone? She laughed ruefully to herself. The religious leaders, however, did not seem especially worried about logistics. She was just a woman after all. She knew all too well the horrors that she would endure with the rising sun. She would be publicly accused and humiliated, and then would likely die a painful death as neighbors and strangers alike tossed curses and stones at her from the secure anonymity of a mob. The room lightened slowly until at last the first rays of morning sun began to filter through the cell. From the narrow window near the ceiling, moments later, the guard pushed open the heavy wooden door, crossed the room to where she was sitting, and roughly pulled her to her feet. The Pharisees were waiting in the courtyard, resplendent in their rich, flowing robes. They preceded her into the street and began to call out her crimes to the good citizens of Jerusalem. "Adulteress! Caught in the very act!" Soon a large crowd began following them. They shouted and spitted at her as the guards harshly shoved her onward. She began sobbing in terror and shame, which seemed to anger the crowd all the more, and then she stumbled and fell. "Get her up," someone snarled in disgust. The guards pulled her from the dust and shoved her forward once again. To her dismay, she realized the mob was driving her straight to the temple. Soon they entered the temple gate, crossed the beautiful patterned floor of the court of the woman, and went straight to where the crowd had already gathered around a seated rabbi for the early morning lesson. They made her stand in the midst of the crowd before him. Shaking convulsively for a moment, she then collapsed to the ground with her face pressed into the dust before she was once again forced to her feet to stand, humiliated before the crowd. The Roman soldiers lining the roof of the cloister nearby tightened the grip on their swords and watched wearily, ready to strike in a moment's notice if the scene boiled over into an uprising. Tension filled the air as the leader of the Pharisees began walking around her, raising his hand to silence the mob, and soon her quiet whimpering was the only sound in the temple courts. The Pharisee turned to address the Rabbi Jesus in a voice loud enough for all to hear. "Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery, in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that she should be stoned." He paused with just a hint of a smile and asked, "But what do you say?" She kept her eyes to the ground, but could feel the heavy weight of the crowd's stares. There was one man, however, who refused to stare. Jesus did not answer the Pharisees, but remained in his seat and bent over to write in the dust. The Pharisees and Sadducees would not be silent so easy. They began interrogating Jesus, demanding that he answer their questions. Would Jesus violate Roman law and send her to death, or would he stand for moral injustice and let her go? It was a no-win situation, which is just what the leaders of the synagogue had been working to achieve. Besides, everyone knew Jesus had a terrible soft spot for sinners. For the Pharisees and the Sadducees, victory was close. They could just almost taste it. Finally, Jesus lifted his finger from the dust and straightened up to face them and pronounced his verdict. "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw the stone at her." Then he bent over and began writing in the dirt again, signaling to them that the matter was settled. A murmur passed through the crowd as the Pharisees whispered among themselves, trying to decide what was their next move. Jesus wrote in the dust, and the woman wept. At the back of the crowd, the eldest Pharisee was the first to recognize that they were beaten and quietly slipped away. Then, one by one, the others followed until only she was left standing before Jesus, awaiting his judgment. She was stunned. Moments before, a cloud had screamed for her blood, and somehow this rabbi, who did not even know her name, had stepped into the Pharisees' crosshairs for her, to take her place as the target of their condemnation and rage. She knew the incident was not over for him. They would not forget such a humiliating loss of their home turf. Jesus straightened once again and looked at her and softly said, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned thee?" "No one, sir," she whispered through her tears. "Then neither do I condemn thee," he said. "Go and leave your life of sin." Light of the world, grant me the grace to withstand the wrongdoings of the deceiver. Remind me daily that he preys on me when I am most vulnerable, luring me into sin only to condemn me when I fall. By your power may I quickly turn to you when my heart is broken, and may I find in you my deepest longings fulfilled, for in you I find blessing without sorrow. In you I find fullness of joy. Ever shine your light into the darkness of my grief, my sin, my coverness need. Keep me near, Lord. Amen. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.